Ja, das ist Familie.
Ihr könnt gar nicht machen. Scheiße, so schwarz die Dummschlag, die Drecksau, die Verflucht. Das ist unsere uns grausam ist. Grausam. Die Drecksau, die Verflucht.
There is a good chance you heard of a movie called The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Well, I might not be the first one to tell you that that movie was inspired by this very case. The horrifying 67 exorcism sessions performed on a girl in her early 20s. However, since this case arose, there is one important question that so few are asking, and that question is: was Anneliese Michel really possessed, or was she killed? I'm not an expert on mental illnesses or anything in that manner, but if I had to guess, I would say all the things or something similar you saw in that intro are happening in the head of a mentally disturbed person. A combination of unrelated images, 1,000 things at once, and an explosion of emotions like you have never seen before. And that was the head of Anneliese Michel. But the problem was, her head displayed the images of demons along with their voices, which ultimately led to her death. Now, like I said in the beginning, since this case arose, a huge number of people that deal with this subject went on to pick mostly one side, the side that was officially put as a cause of her death, a demonic possession. However, the other very realistic possibility still gets highly overshadowed by it. So, today I'm gonna give you one case with two stories, one case with two possibilities, but unfortunately one case with the same ending. And I'm going to ask you one simple question: what side are you on? Anna Elisabeth Michel was born in West Germany in 1952 to a middle-class family. She had 3 younger sisters, and since her parents were Roman Catholics, she was raised very religiously and attended church mass every Sunday. However, that all changed when she turned 16. She began to have frequent seizures and was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy, a condition that can progress into the type in which consciousness is involved. This can cause an individual's inability to read, speak, understand words, as well as a state of confusion. An obvious condition that can greatly affect the further course of life. And for Anneliese, that was enough to ruin her existence. Anneliese was settled in a psychiatric institution and was receiving medication to help with her symptoms. But the medication she was taking had a weak effect, and in fact the situation became much worse. She began to hallucinate and see faces of the demons. She was convinced that she could smell fire, which of course was not there, and that she was developing paralysis on both hands. Based on this, the doctors prescribed certain drugs that were used with illness like schizophrenia and other forms of delusion. However, like many, she became depressed and soon began to hear voices that haunted her and ruined her health even more. Despite the great efforts of her doctors, her mental condition worsened by 1973, and she became even more depressed. After a year of treatment and various medications that were unsuccessful, she thought it was something else that required a different type of intervention. She believed that she was possessed by demons, and that the only thing that could save her was an exorcism. The reason she believed in something like that, in addition to everything, was the fact that her mother gave birth before marriage, and thus she believed that the curse was passed on to her. To make matters worse, that child died during the 1956 operation. One friend of Anneliese was a supporter of this theory because she had some strange religious experiences in previous years when she was in her company. This referred to refusing holy water from a spring or walking near anything resembling a cross. This and some other situations convinced her family and friends that there was actually some very bad force. Her parents started contacting the priests in the hope that they would save her with the help of an exorcism. Initially, all requests were rejected, and they were suggested to seek medical forms of treatment. Furthermore, the priest explained that such rituals require the approval of the bishop, and this can be approved only for the specific cases. In translation, before anything else, it had to be established and proved in some way that the individual was really possessed. The term under which the Catholic Church signified possession was infestation. There were also facts such as feelings of aversion to religious subjects, and Anneliese obviously coincided there. However, despite that, the exorcism she wanted so much has not been approved yet. Instead, she developed some more unusual behaviors, such as violence, biting herself, or biting family members. She started eating flies, spiders, and coal, as well as drinking her own urine. Of course, due to everything she ate and drank, she often had moments when she vomited uncontrollably, and the whole situation became very desperate. In late 73, she started taking the drug called Tegretol, which was supposed to stabilize emotions in addition to the attack. But, like previous drugs, it turned out inefficient. On her behalf, the priest named Ernst Old contacted Bishop Josef Stangl to conduct an exorcism. He observed and concluded she was not an epileptic, and as far as he noticed, she never had a seizure. He believed that all the symptoms she showed were the result of demons. Finally, in 1975, the bishop gave his approval at the third request of the family, and the procedure was to be performed by the priest Arnold Rentz in strict secrecy. The first session took place in September of the same year, followed by a total of 66 more sessions, which were conducted twice a week for 4 hours. The session consisted of reading prayers, moving crosses back and forth, burning incense and some other things. Anneliese would scream for hours, emitting sounds that were not in tune with a human. For some moments it seemed to work because all but one of the demons has left her body, but the next day the situation was at the beginning again. At that moment the family decided to reject all medical treatments and focus only on healing with the help of a priest. As the treatments progressed, Anneliese stopped eating and drinking because, according to her, the demons didn't allow her to do so. According to some sources, at one point she even demanded that the entire process be stopped because she came to terms with the fact that there was no salvation for her. In the process of performing the sessions, audio tapes were recorded in which Anneliese speaks several languages and not quite in her own human voice. In other words, her body was not possessed by one, but by at least 7 demons that manifested through various ways. she spoke fluent foreign languages such as Greek and Latin. I will now play a small part of recorded audio tapes, but I must warn you, this is some truly terrifying stuff. So, be prepared.
Der Hass drängt dich. Ne? Der Hass lässt dir keine.
Der Neid über die andere Engel.
Bei uns gibt's nie Ruhe. Ruhe gibt's nur da oben.
Ruhe gibt's nur dort, wo die Liebe ist.
Ja, bei uns gibt's nur
Nur Hass.
Ja,
Und wo nur Hass ist, da gibt's keine Ruhe.
nein. Und für uns gibt's nie Ruhe. Nie.
Weil,
In der Ewigkeit.
weil er nicht dorthin kommt, wo der Schöpfer ist.
Ja, aber für uns gibt's kein... So schlecht mein Amt verwaltet habe.
Wer bist du? Judas.
Nein.
Fleischmann
Oh ja, ich muss jetzt gehen.
in die Hölle.
Oh ja.
Und du weißt noch, was du zu sagen hast? Der Nächste dran. Wer ist der Nächste? Der Nächste keiner, der Mehrere. Der Nächste kein im Namen des dreifaltigen Gottes, des Vaters und des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes.
Ich bin der keine.
Dreifaltigen Gottes.
Ich hab ein Bruder geschlagen.
Anneliese allegedly knew and predicted the exact date of her death, and unfortunately she passed away on July 1st, 76, when she was just 23 years old. Her last words to the priest were to pray for the salvation of her mother, for whom she feared the most. Now, in this part, we'll deal with the other possibility which so many people overlook. After Anneliese's death, the whole case took a completely different turn and went to court. Her parents and the priest who conducted the exorcism were actually prosecuted for negligent homicide. It was pointed out that medical intervention could save her life at any given time until she passed away, such as forced feeding. The doctors issued a statement that Anneliese was not possessed and that her symptoms were only the result of a mixture of epilepsy and religious beliefs. Some experts stated that she also had a very severe form of schizophrenia and that the actual causes of death were starvation and dehydration. It was determined that she was in a state of starvation for almost a full year, and on the day of her death, her body weighed only 30 kilograms. Before she passed away, due to that fact, she became very weak and fragile, and the movements performed during the procedures completely destroyed both of her knees. However, long story short, at the end of the trial, they somehow managed to refute the guilt, and after the initial sentence of 6 months in prison, the state gave them 3 years of probation. And the main reason was the court believed that the family had already suffered enough. Now, there are a number of points we need to cover when speaking about this possibility, and I think the first one and the most important one needs to be time. As in the time when the event occurred, and it was in the 70s. We need to take into consideration the fact that medical knowledge cannot be compared at any level in 1970s and in 2022. The doctors just didn't know as much as they do today. Even though they had their diagnosis regarding Anneliese's condition, the priests and the family still pushed their beliefs and their story. If you go back in time, you can see that people actually used to cure headache with a helmet and with a couple of strikes with a hammer. I kid you not. And if you go even further, you can see the influence of witchcraft. People believing in vampires, people burning others on a pyre, just for saying different things. In my personal opinion, what amplifies the belief of the family is their connection with religion. With all of them being very religious, I think it is safe to assume they absolutely didn't want to see other possibilities other than what they thought and what Anneliese thought. And if you think about this, the majority, if not all, of these demonic possession cases happen only to the ones that are very religious. Could all this be just a product of their imagination? Remember, Anneliese was in that kind of state that she simply could not make the difference between reality and dreams anymore. Along with hallucinations, not eating anything, or in her case, eating spiders, coal, and drinking urine, plus the exhausting exorcism sessions the priest inflicted upon her. Can we in fact really take into consideration what she said was actually reasonable and sane? Again, like I said, she was in a deep state of starvation and dehydration, and considering her epileptic condition, that was certainly not the bonus. You might not know this, but epilepsy was once considered as proof of demonic possession, when they, like I said, didn't know any better. Her psychosis and neurological conditions could be caused by different things, including brain-damaging parasites, which have been found in human brains and confirmed by autopsies. But how we would explain the voice captured on audio tapes? I must admit that I have some second thoughts on that, since they certainly don't sound like the product of a human being. However, according to some sources, starvation could make a person growl like that. In the meantime, that would leave us with the knowledge of foreign languages. And this seems to be a common thing when any sort of exorcism is included. I know how complicated human brain and subconscious actually is, so in my opinion, it is not actually impossible she picked it up somewhere and that the knowledge somehow stay embedded in her consciousness, or the family simply made it up to solidify their claims of a demonic possession. The fact that just doesn't give me rest is the fact that they confirmed she could have been saved through force feeding, but instead the family decided to lay their faith in the church. After all this, Anneliese's body was exhumed in order to be transferred to a better coffin, but that was not the original reason. One nun, after having a vision, contacted her parents and told them how her body remained intact, and that it was the actual proof of their entire story. However, that didn't turn out to be true in the end. But despite this, the case continued to gain public attention, and Anneliese's house eventually became some sort of a tourist attraction, as it usually happens. As a final result, the church changed its statement several times that it was actually a mental disorder and that there was no possession, but the damage has already been done. After these events, the new pope passed a law on exorcism, and obtaining permission for something like that became extremely difficult. Whether they were right or not, to this day, nobody actually knows. So, after hearing all of it, my question for you is still the same. What do you think? Was Anneliese really possessed, or was she killed?